Thank you, Fanny. Can we go to the next slide? Well, it's a pleasure to see you all here. Thank you for your interest in taking part in this scoping workshop. This is a fundamental space for exchange on this global funding initiative under the framework of the Belmont Forum. I am the science director of the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, one of the two organizations which, together with FAPESP, is organizing this initiative. First, I wanted to go over the key goals of the initiative, which are to coordinate actions and projects with a transdisciplinary and participatory approach to develop innovative solutions to these challenges, to recognize pressing challenges and opportunities to meet the targets under the Sustainable Development Goals and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And we also acknowledge that there are fundamental differences in the different tropical forests in terms of governance, cultural diversity, and ecology as well, and the territorial configuration across tropical forests. So we don't think that all tropical forests are the same. So we aim to embrace these differences and think of solutions that can be scaled from the local to the global. Next slide, please. Well, the objectives for this scoping workshop are to create a space of dialogue among yourselves, specialists, experts, representatives from NGO and funding institutions, to discuss the scope of this funding initiative, and also to the roadmap, to think of the roadmap and the schedule, the planning times, to discuss with you what at one point in the process we are for this initiative that is going to be launched in 2024. So we want to co-create and co-design the key themes to be addressed in this call. Next slide, please. Well, briefly, an introduction to the IAI. If you don't know us, we are an intergovernmental institution that serves 36 countries in the Americas. And our vision is to promote the creation and dissemination of scientific information on global change with a transdisciplinary approach, and to create knowledge and tools that can be used for decision makers, mainly by member countries of the IAI. We also host the Belmont Forum, and we also gladly are cooperating with FAPESP for this call.
Muchas gracias, Ana. Sí, adelante.
Thank you so much, Ana. Go ahead, Alex.
I'm talking in English because my Spanish is not good enough. Sorry about that. Welcome, everyone. I'm Alexander Rocato. I'm a program manager at FAPESP, the São Paulo Research Funding Agency from the state of São Paulo in Brazil. So I'm an employee at FAPESP, and I take care as a program manager of many of our international collaborations, including some multinational, and especially taking care of the Belmont Forum initiative. So talking about a little bit about the FAPESP funding agency, we're a state funding agency, and our budget comes from the taxpayers from the economic development of the state of São Paulo, which is the biggest in the country of Brazil. So it's in a reflex of that. Our budget is the biggest one in the country, well, we're structured in the states of Brazil. So each state has its own state funding agency. FAPESP is the oldest of those and more structured also because of that. And also as a reflect of our economic situation, scientists and PhD students are mostly located in the state of São Paulo. And if you count on publications in international scientific publications, FAPESP has 45, it's a rough number, of publications in the indexed vehicles from Brazil, from the whole country. We are extremely autonomous in relation to the government. So we have a constitution in the state of São Paulo that states what FAPESP does and don't do. So we are free of comings and goings of the governor or the political party at the moment. So we are very flexible, and we hold. For the next slide, please, Fanny. So we, for this initiative, we are represented by the group of collaborations of FAPESP. So we have a lot of collaborations within the whole world. We have bilateral collaborations, the main funding agencies around the world, and also we participate in many multinational initiatives in all areas of knowledge. And talking about the Belmont Forum, we are part of the Belmont Forum since the very beginning, which is more than 10 years now. Taking part of most of the calls for proposals. We'll talk about the structure of the calls for proposals in the Belmont Forum. So we will have a good understanding of how this works. And we are glad to have IAI participate in this. They are more recently engaged into the Belmont Forum, so we're very pleased to have them co-organizing this initiative with us. For the next slide, please, Fanny. Well, this is just an important message. So this can apply to each of the agencies that take part of initiatives of the Belmont Forum. So particularly, FAPESP can fund researchers in the state of São Paulo. They are affiliated to institutions in the state of São Paulo. But of course, the research object of the projects that we fund can be everywhere in the world. And now this square here is talking about the FAPESP's initiatives regarding Amazon and tropical forests initiatives. So we fund for researching everywhere, all kinds of biomes, and we are as being state funding of the São Paulo, no matter of that, we are the biggest funder of research in the country for initiatives in the Amazon region. So we spend a lot of funds and funding research projects and fellowships in the Amazon region. As an example of that, we just launched last year a call for proposal for participation of researchers from all states of São Paulo. We were a leader in that call for research being done in the Amazon region, and particularly talking about sustainable development in the region, because FAPESP in the country, we do a lot of natural sciences research, data collection, and satellite imaging, and all that hard sciences usually do in such cases. So we do a lot of that. So now we are focused on sustainable development and reaching out populations and all research related to conditions for the region and devoted to populations and the local climate, let's say, outcomes of the global change. So we are engaging a lot more in these, more sustainable and more devoted to populations research in the region. For next slide, please, Fanny. Well, so now talking about the Belmont Forum. The Belmont Forum is an initiative from different funding agencies from the whole world. And we don't fund projects by ourselves or the Belmont Forum. We are a collective of agencies. Of course, there's the Secretariat that manages our initiatives, but the funding comes from the agencies that participate in one and another activity. Well, the Belmont Forum focuses on global environmental change. So this is the focus of the Belmont. So in this phrase here, we have a lot of information. That's what the challenge that we seek. So this is, there are many words here that are really important, which is, the first one is transdisciplinary. This has to happen in all of our activities. So we want to engage end users, we have with all stakeholders that relate to an initiative that we are considering. Of course, there's science everywhere here, but we must have social sciences, must have public policies, engagement, we have to have end user engagement, population engagements. So that's what we are seeking in all of our activities. And of course, the drive is global change in all of its aspects. We want to understand, mitigate, and adapt to all of these changes that are even each time more hardly and timely happening in a global scale. So for the next slide, please, Fanny, I guess. For me, we're talking about CRA. So this is how the Belmont Forum operate when we want to focus on another more detailed aspect of our or the activities of the Belmont. So we divide our activities in collaborative research actions. So we choose a focus of study or of discussions that comes out from the partners or the member agencies of the Belmont Forum. And these activities can or not lead to a call for proposal, a multinational call for proposal. Usually it does. So that's what, in this particular case, for the Amazon and tropical regions in general, we're expecting to have a call for proposals to be launched at the beginning of the last year. So we'll talk about that, more about that later. So these CRAs have some, we have some, let's say, some aspects that we used to have in our CRAs. It has to be transdisciplinary. That's, again, our focus. We have different disciplines, of course, because there's a lot to be done in the aspects of the global, the Belmont Challenge addresses. So there's a lot of things to do. Of course, we have to have social actors. It has to be co-production and participation from those actors that I mentioned before. We want to have that from the very beginning of the development of the projects. So there's not just the usual researchers from our partner agencies. We want to have co-production, co-participation from all the actors. Usually our calls, let's talk more in a sense of the call for proposal, traditional multilateral call for proposal. Usually our calls, we want to engage at least 3 different countries, meaning 3 different agencies participate at that particular call that can fund these 3 researchers that will be the co-PIs of the project. So, okay, as an observation here, more than often, there's a lot more than 3 participating in our consortium, our individual projects, which is really a measure of how broad and our reach is broad and multinational. So this is, well, let's talk now about this particular CRA, about the Amazon tropical forest. I think I'll give the word to anyone else, Fanny, or I can move on here.
Yeah, you can continue with this slide, Alex.
Okay, so this is more or less what a CRA looks like, a timeline from the recent ones. We're being more, let's say, we have more activities and we have more engagement from participants and from the various actors. And it started out in recent years from our CRAs. And as example, we are just launched one CRA for climate, environment, and health that I would advise everyone to take a look at it, so how it works and how we are doing these calls. We are trying to have something similar here. Of course, the themes are completely different, but that would be a good reading for everyone here. So talking about the Amazon tropical CRA timeline, we're starting to have these scoping workshops. This is the first one. Now we are talking about the science that we want to address here in this call. So we've been having, of course, meetings within the funding agencies. And now we want to start talking with scientists, so, local communities, and all stakeholders that we would like to engage in this initiative. So what we expect here, have talks and understand what the community needs, what the scientists thinks there are a way of moving forward. So that's what we expect in our scoping workshops that we'll be having throughout the year. There are funders meetings all time. There will be a special meeting in back to the SRI SRI event on in June this year in the Panama City. There will be in-person meetings there. You will learn about the agendas in the near future. And all of these, we will come out with producing a draft of the call text that we expect to have that by September. And for that one, we really want to have feedback and input from everyone present here. Then there's the annual Belmont Forum plenary. All members join, and we decide things related to the Belmont Forum, and we want to present this call, at least what I expect to be the final text at this meeting in October. And then there will be the preparatory activities from the participating agencies and the Belmont Forum Secretariat, of course, which is really working hard in all of these calls, and expect to launch the call in early 2024. There will be a time for discussions for then the community will learn about the call. They will learn about the call text and what we expect in the call. Then researchers will start to work and looking for stakeholders they want to engage, as I mentioned, in co-production of the project. So we have a period of time for those to engage and prepare their proposals. Then there will be the usual timeline for submission, evaluation, which would be done like usual for the Belmont Forum initiatives. And we expect to have the project starting in late 24, maybe early 25. Again, following what a Belmont Forum usually do in these calls, especially this one, which is we expect to be a big one with many projects and many engagement from much of engagement from funding agencies, stakeholders, and communities. And more details will come as we move forward within the year. So I think that's my part, right, Fanny?
Yes, thank you so much, Alexander.
Okay, thank you very much for your attention and good work to everyone for the next minutes.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias, Alexander y Ana, por...
Thank you very much, Alexander and Yana, for sharing that valuable information and the background about the CRA, the Collaborative Research Action. As Anna was saying, the objective of this specific workshop is to explore where in the development of knowledge and information about the Amazon and tropical forests we are at. So to start this discussion, also we have invited our first panel member who's joining us today. We're very happy to have her, Marielos Peñaclaros. She's a Bolivian researcher with a PhD in ecology from the University of Utrecht, the Netherlands. Dr. Peñaclaros is a professor of the Forest Management Group of Groningen University, where she has been working since 2010. Marielos has specialized in forest ecology and has focused on forest management of tropical forests, focused on ecologic research to define best practices of management, especially of forests. Dr. Peñaclaros is interested in observing the recovery of forests after human disturbances and also the treatment that accelerate recovery processes. Marielos is also currently the co-president or the co-chair of the Science Panel for the Amazon. Thank you very much, Marielos, for accepting this invitation to take part in this workshop. And also, I would like to tell our participants that we have been informed about the report of the Science Panel for the Amazon, so it will be a pleasure to listen to Marielos. So I'll give you the floor. Thank you, Fanny. Good morning, everyone.
One way or the other, I presented, one way or the other, I ended up putting my presentation in English, so I will go from Spanish to English, but let me first, no, wait a second, yes, this one. Are you seeing my presentation? Can you see it?
Sí, Mariela, se está cargando.
Okay,
Sí,
perfecto, muchas gracias. Yeah, okay, so good morning again to everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation to give a presentation in this event. It's really a great honor, and we see as well as a great opportunity to share with you the main findings and recommendations of the work of the Science Panel for the Amazon. The Science Panel for the Amazon was established by the Sustainable Development Solution Network of the United Nations in September 2019 in New York. And currently it groups more than 24 scientists, authors, that are representing in about 65% of them are from Amazonian countries. It includes some indigenous scientists, authors within the group. And we are also always, of which we are very proud of, but we are also proud of saying that 42% of our authors are women. The Science Panel for the Amazon has a strategic committee that is composed of respected leaders from the region and the globe. And it also has a steering scientific committee that has 14 members, and it's going to be expanded to 20 members very shortly. The main objectives of the SPA is to systematize information for a scientific assessment of the state of Amazonian ecosystems and populations, to examine trends and implications for the region's long-term well-being, and to explore opportunities and policy options for the conservation and sustainable development of the Amazon. One of the first things that we did as a group was to define what we actually call Amazon. And our definition is based actually of the basin of the Amazon. So it's not only our work didn't focus only in the Amazonian lowlands, but also includes the origin of the rivers that flow into the Amazon, Amazon River. What have we done so far? We have in Glasgow in November 2021, we presented the first Amazon assessment report at the COP26, and this is really this was really a very large effort because all this report over 1,300 pages was actually written during COVID time online, and the report has three parts. One part is focusing on the Amazon as a regional entity of the Earth system. So it talks about geology, biodiversity, human populations that have occupied the area since 12,000 years ago. And it goes only more or less until the 1900s. Then the second part of the report focuses on the drivers of change. What are the changes that have occurred in the last 50, 100 years in the Amazon due to deforestation, degradation, mining, illegal logging, and other illegal activities, and how that is affecting not only the climate and our water systems, but it's also how this is affecting the human population that is living in these areas. What are the consequences in terms of health, in terms of livelihoods? And finally, the last part of the report focuses on the potential solutions that we have for the area. So this makes our report a bit different because we really wanted from the start to not only focus on the problems or what are the issues at the state, but also come up with potential solutions. We have also launched in the COP of last year 3 policy briefs focusing on tipping points, arcs of restoration instead of arcs of deforestation, but restoration. What can you do to restore the areas that have been deforested, and on the role of Amazonian indigenous people in fighting the climate crisis. So what are the recommendations of the report? I want to highlight the 3 main recommendations. And the first one is that we should stop deforestation and degradation by 2030, and that certain measures need to be taken not only at that time, but from now onwards. But we need to go even farther than stopping deforestation. Our report also highlights the urgent need to move towards a fair and just transformation. So from the very beginning, we ask ourselves, what are the principles and values that will allow us to achieve a living vision for the Amazon? And this vision needs to be inclusive and just, and needs to promote healthy societies, environments, and economies. So in the solution space that we envision is that we need to move towards sustainable, inclusive, and resilient pathways or livelihoods. And for that, we need to work in these different areas that are highlighted here. So conservation of the Amazon, restoration, strengthening Amazonian citizenships and governance, and also to develop an alternative way of doing business in the area, in an alternative economy that we have called bioeconomy of standing forests and flowing rivers. And we also see the urgent need to invest in education, science, and technology. And therefore, we are really looking forward to this initiative that the EIE, FAPESP, and the Development Forum are taking along to come up with a call that focuses on Amazonian forests. So we applaud that effort very much. So I was asked to think about what are the research needs. And obviously in this report that we have produced, there is really a very large list of research needs. So what I will show you are some of the ideas, that some of the suggestions, but there are really many much more that I cannot mention during due to the time constraints. So research needs are large because there are lots of unknowns. The Amazon basin is really an understudied region. So basic understudied regions, and that shows not even shows in the fact that we are discovering on a regular basis new species of different organisms, even large, even mammals in this case, with new species of monkeys, for example, new species of fishes and so on, but also of plants, etc. But it so there is a so we do still need a lot to do a lot of basic research because the need is still very large. Something that came out from the work that we have done synthesizing information is that the knowledge gaps that of the Amazon varies with country and varies with regions in the countries. So we cannot talk about a research gap that is valid for the whole Amazon. And what we saw is that certain areas, for example, countries like Brazil, because of the investments on research, there is much more information from Brazil than there is from other countries in the region. So the knowledge gaps will vary from country to country. And there is certainly a large need to exchange information, tools, and know-how among researchers, Amazonian researchers, and among Amazonian countries. The solution space also requires several research approaches, from fundamental to applied research, from monodisciplinary research to transdisciplinary research. And it also really requires the engagement with different actors and with different views. So not only focus on the traditional way of doing research, but also including the views of indigenous people and local communities. And we also need to have an integrative approach because the drivers of change is really affecting the Amazon at very different layers that are often very much interconnected. So another aspect that I would like to highlight is the need of strengthening environmental monitoring systems that allow integrating basin-wide data. So data that is comparable, transparent, and accessible to anybody and to everybody. So this data could be done through obtained through remote sensing aspects, like, for example, map biomass is doing, could be related to fire. But also I think that we also need to monitor socioeconomic indices and how they are being affected by drivers of change, like deforestation, climate change, but also how these socioeconomic indices are being affected by policies and by illegal activities. And we need to integrate all these different sources of information to understand better the response of the system to all these different drivers, and to assess how the whole Amazon basin is being affected. Some key scientific questions that are open and that I think require really a more transdisciplinary approach, and because of the call, potential call of the Development Forum is hoping will have a transdisciplinary aspect. I thought that it would be worth mentioning that we really need to get a better understanding how close the Amazon is from tipping points, And if certain regions, for example, like Southern Amazon, where we see changes in climate and changes in temperature and rainfall patterns, if those are, how close are they, if they have already reaching a tipping point, and how can we actually reverse that? Then the question is if these arcs of reforestation that have been proposed by the panel will actually be able to avoid these tipping points. Another set of important questions, I think, are related to the impact of these changes on ecosystem functioning and the provision of ecosystem services, and how to merge science knowledge with indigenous people, local communities knowledge for supporting a bioeconomy of standing forests and flowing rivers. In the policy brief related to the policy brief that we launched last year, we are suggesting that these arcs of deforestation that are very well that we are very well aware that they should become actually arcs of reforestation, and then that opens many questions that could be addressed using that needs to be addressed using an integrative approach or a transdisciplinary approach. Questions like, what is the best approach for restoring these areas to enhance resilience and landscape connectivity? How to achieve long-term permanence of restored forests? What are the socioeconomic implications of restoring these areas? And what are sustainable production systems that should be promoted in these areas? This leads me to the proposal that we have in terms of developing a new bioeconomy of standing forests and flowing rivers, in which we will actually be using the forest and the resources of the forest to improve the livelihoods of the local people and of the Amazon as a whole, but maintaining these forest covers and rivers in good health. So there are lots really of questions in that sense of what do we need to do, how do we get there, what are the most promising species that can be used, how should these species be managed, and what is the knowledge that already exists for managing these forests, and how can we implement that in a larger scale. So lots of questions in there as well. Yeah, and with that, I would like to finish my presentation, and thank you for the attention.
Muchas gracias, Marielos.
Thank you so much, Marielos. Really important information you have shared with us, including some proposed solutions, as well as the significance of including the indigenous peoples and the local populations in the development of science and research in the area. So now we have our second speaker. Our second speaker is a representative from the indigenous peoples in the Amazon, from the region. He's Harold Rincón Ipuchima, an indigenous leader of the Grulla clan from the Amazon area in Colombia, and he has devoted his organization work to fighting colonialism and exploitation, and he has worked in several land organization projects with indigenous peoples in the low part of the Putumayo River in Caquetá, Apores, and Mirita, Paraná. He was General Secretary of the Catis Azoetan and coordinator of climate change and diversity of the Coordination of Indigenous Peoples of the Amazon Basin, and he's the General Secretary of the National Organization of Indigenous Peoples from the Colombian Amazon, OPIAC. We are very happy and honored to have Harold as a speaker, and he will be sharing with us some information and the perspective of the indigenous peoples so that we can include that into this CRA we are working on. So Harold, you can turn your mic on and your camera on, and if you wish, you can share your screen. Can you hear me? Yes, yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm in a location with a not so stable internet connection, so I need to take advantage of the connection that I have right now. So hello, everyone. On behalf of the indigenous peoples of Colombia, of the Amazon Basin, and on behalf of our entire organization structure, we would like you to know that the indigenous peoples of the Amazon are peoples who are coming to the world right now with multiple solutions for climate change and for protecting biodiversity. So all global campaigns done by the COICA, AIMC, COYAVI, Sino, Orpia, all have to do with that global agenda that is the work that we have presented to the UN. So the indigenous peoples of the Amazon Basin appear before governments and the world today to tell you that the peoples of the Amazon have a contribution to make to the goals, to the SDG goals, to the 21 goals for the new framework for biodiversity protection and holistic conservation. So for us, the territory of some strategic ecosystems such as the Amazon, Chocó, the Mayan forest, Chaco in Argentina are some ecosystems that require special attention today so that governments can meet those goals that they have committed to work on in these international agreements. So, and I would like to hear you from you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Harold, for your introduction and for being here in this workshop, in this debate that we are opening up to prioritize some of the themes for research in the Amazon. So your participation and the presence of indigenous social organizations is key, these spaces. Thank you.
Bienvenidas, bienvenidos a todos nuevamente a la plenaria.
Welcome back, everyone, to the plenary room. Sorry to take a few more minutes from your time. Thank you very much for your great discussions in the different rooms. I'm sure you could define who would represent you in this final discussion to give us a summary during this plenary on the main points covered in the rooms. We had 5 working rooms. So who would like to start? As we are running late, maybe the moderator of each room will take just 1 minute to present. Yes. Can you let us know what was your room number and give us a brief summary in 1 minute? Nicolas, go ahead. I don't know if our room had a name or number, but it was in Spanish. We had participants from Bolivia, Peru, Brazil, and with different approaches, climate, science. We had the representative of the natural Science Museum. So regarding what are the main challenges to a more sustainable future for the Amazon and other tropical forests, we identified different factors that had a relationship with humans, like organized crime, violence, loss of land, deforestation, also the building of roads, also the need to reduce poverty was mentioned so that we can really have a sustainable Amazon in the long term. Regarding the second question, what information, tools, or capacity building are needed to address these challenges? The challenges we identified in the first question were related to the second question, meaning that there's a need to plan the decision-making process in the territories that are integrated, that include information not only from Western science, but also regarding the ancestral knowledge of communities that they have been used that knowledge to manage their land for hundreds of years in order to create from that more coordinated information for the management of territory and managing the sustainable long-term plans. And regarding what are the opportunities for equitable and effective community-based adaptation and mitigation practices, we identify that once we address those challenges, we have defined that we have a social laboratory. So from the anthropological aspect, we can create a series of opportunities and particular aspects that can lead to participatory processes, integrating processes, and of course, taking into account sustainability, economics. We have also identified the possibility of, within the territories and the local communities, to strengthen capacities, to have people generate their own information and be able to make decisions on their own. That would be it. Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you. My suggestion for the other presenters, please try to keep it in a tweet format so that we can gather and synthesize all the information as much as possible. Thank you. Yes, so let's try to make your presentations even shorter. So, okay, we also were in a Spanish group, and what we could highlight the most was to take into account the transdisciplinary approach and go beyond the academic entities, but also take into consideration the co-building of knowledge, including communities, meaning that we have to acknowledge all their information, their knowledge, so that with that we can co-build better possibilities for a more sustainable Amazon region in the long term. That would be the takeout. Thank you. So transdisciplinary aspect would be the main highlight. Someone from the other English groups? We had 3 groups in English.
Decide on someone to report on our group, so I, as the facilitator, can provide some really quick comments. So to follow up on what Marlies just said, we also talked about the importance of integrating science and local ecological knowledges, local communities and indigenous knowledges, and the challenges and opportunities that are brought to the table of managing those contributions. And we also talked a lot about local and territorially based commitments from agencies, from local communities, and how this territorialized form of managing combinations of scientific and local ecological knowledge are really important to move forward with the agenda. And we also commented about how important it is to let everyone know and spread the word about the tipping point and how fast it's approaching for the Amazon.
Muchas gracias, Laila. El equipo 2, el grupo 2 en inglés.
Team 2 in English.
I don't think I assigned anyone for our group, but I can definitely give a brief overview that was a different take for everyone that we've heard so far. So I hear that I think everything that was mentioned was exactly what we talked about in our group. I think the one thing that was unique is the challenges of preserving Indigenous knowledge and also connecting that to and the use of that to make sure that if we do anything technical with database wise, we make sure that that information is conveyed appropriately to the communities using words that are from the community. I think so basically, in short, linking language to epistemologies in short. Yes. Thanks, Manny.
Sure. Thank you, Brian. Muchas gracias, Brian. El equipo.
Thank you, Brian.
And
Team
so
3.
for the third group, again, I wouldn't say that we talked about everything that I would have said, but there's a lot of similar themes that have come up. One thing that I must admit that I cannot remember who to attribute this to, but it was sort of this idea that we need to make the invisible visible and elevate the problems that often are not focused on because they're the problems of the local communities. There was a lot of discussion about capacity building and specifically capacity building to make these more diverse research teams, but also to train the next generation of folks, particularly around data science and different ways of knowing. The one last thing that hasn't been mentioned is just trying to, I mean, has been mentioned, but really building on the successes that have already taken place and thinking about the rich data sets that exist in the region and worldwide, right? So we did discuss the fact that this is one tropical forest or mini tropical forest in one tropical region, and we could expand it. But I think really making sure that we look at the opportunities that we have based on knowledge that has already been gained.
Muchas gracias, Rebeca. Muchas gracias a los 5 grupos.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you to the 5 groups for those very enriching discussions and the different perspectives you have brought to this discussion. And thank you for making this a more collaborative session regarding the call that we have planned for the coming year. So to wrap up, I would like to share with you a last slide. As we mentioned before at the beginning of this workshop, this is the first workshop in which we start a discussion on the topics that will become a priority for the call of the Amazon and other tropical forests. We also have additional events planned for this year so that with other organizations, regional governments and the academia, we can continue developing this call. So we will have a next activity for scoping during the Innovation, Science and Technology Congress that will take place in June from 26th to the 30th in Panama City. You might be familiar with it already. So those of you who are going to attend this event, we will have 2 sessions, one for scoping and identification of priorities. So you're welcome to join this SRI event. Those of you who were not familiar with this event, here you can scan the QR code to visit the website about the event. It's related to transdisciplinary science. So with this, I can wrap up. Finally, thank you very much for joining this workshop. If anyone has a final comment, you can say so. I would just like to thank everyone. Thank you for staying a bit longer. Your input is very valuable. We're going to leave the Jamboards open for 2 more days. We can send you the links to these Jamboards by email so you can add more input. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of the week.